Okay, that sort of concludes our, the topics that we wanted to cover today, apart from the fact that we now have an open forum panel discussion. We have got a number of questions that came up on, what was it again, Monica? Yes. Yeah.
So you still can scan the code.
Yeah. So feel free to throw some questions at us. We have some questions already prepared that we can answer, but I think rather than answering those, we're more than happy to answer any questions you may have that come up from the floor. So I'll just get Adam and Dave and Sandy to come and join me. So are there any questions, or is it time for coffee?
There's a great question today around trust with...
That's a big question. Just expand on it a little bit more, and I'll kind of facilitate.
Just how you are structuring security and IT, and also understanding, or I suppose not see hallucination is often.
Yeah. So the world has done a really good job on creating the clickbait headlines, and trust, security, hallucination, IP leakage, all of those things are totally real when you use off the internet free software that's not vetted for use within inside a commercial organization. That's totally it. If you go to a scam website and put in your credit card information, you're going to get scammed. And AI is no different. There's 1,000,001 different tools to use out there to bring into your business. And you've exactly kind of hit the reason why SupaHuman exists, is that this is about taking technology that is universally ubiquitous and can be used by anybody and making it fit for purpose for your business to do two things. One is provide enterprise controls to make sure your IP is safe, it's secure, you're not leaking anything out to the market and or anything else. So that's just good engineering and good technology choices. And the second part about trust is trust of the user and trust of the adopter. So if you take it back to a human standpoint, if I ask you for something and the answer you give me is garbage, I no longer trust you as a human anymore. Same, AI is no different. And that just goes into how do you engineer good results. And unfortunately, when you start to use the wrong tool for the wrong thing, trust erodes in the industry quite quickly. And I imagine you've all used like ChatGPT or open free services, you've applied them to the wrong use case, which is had to do it something quite complex, or you've used it at work and you've gone, I don't trust that thing. It's because it's the wrong tool for the wrong job. So to answer your question, it's the same but different from any technology we've ever brought in before. Right thing for the right choice with the right, the right controls, and you're good to go. We've built services for clients that are hugely trust dependent. We've produced a suicide prevention AI that has to be accurate. It cannot hallucinate, and you bend that out by engineering. It's exactly the same process you'll go through manufacturing. How do you guarantee good quality product? Processes, procedures, following them, good engineering. All good? Do you trust me? No.
I have a question on your ROI model. So in this context, I could understand the replacing the tedious jobs, reducing TDM. In something that I do, we have a focus on value that brings us more of a front-end sales point of view. Like these days, do you have that sort of sense in your mind as well, like the value that change can bring?
Thank you. It's a good question. I think the way I would think about that is when you free up the work that adds low value, you've got the mind capacity to be able to focus on the strategic stuff. And we do an example of a large telco where you onboard a new sales individual to that large telco, and they've got 20 odd different thousand products, loads of SKUs. And how do you expect someone to succeed at being valuable to a business or prospect when they know they just can't come up to speed and all of that stuff? And you essentially can get that person match fit pretty quickly so they can have the proper conversations around the sales methodologies that which you use. And that itself is an art form, right? taking an individual and saying, look, we are a challenger sales methodology here, and we use BANT for qualification, and how do we, like, they shouldn't be spending their first 6 months just reading product documentation. It should be her learning the sales craft and driving that. So I think to answer your question, AI, as like any technology, doesn't solve everyone's problems, but can it give you the time and the space to go, right, well, actually, what is my job versus what's the work? The job is selling. The work is all the things that need to do to get to that job. And hammering out proposals for 6 hours until midnight to hit a deadline for the morning is not a good use of a smart person. Yeah.
Exactly that. Yeah. That's the ideal phrase. Running a medium-sized business, setting $4.5 million, about 60% upside by saving 5 hours a day by not doing busy work. You just couldn't text an email fast enough to keep up run his business. And he wanted to be the sole point of sales, such as Walsheim's business. He just literally couldn't do the working fast. I think that's exactly right. I'm not so much in teach and how to sell, I can be the expert. Stone cold killer country boy salesman. But just free this time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like turning those nuggets of information that he or she would be able to extract from those sales conversations and going, right, I want that in a contract proposal in the next 5 minutes, please. Bang. Follow-up client research, stakeholder mapping, like competitor analysis. I say it like it's easy. There's obviously work to do, but it's not a whole heap of engineering to codify the IP of that individual. Well, how do you do it? How do you sell? Okay, well, let's do a digital twin of that, and then away we go. Yep.
Next table for Swiss.
Yes.
I come from a citizens background, data user, and we often work in a very orthodox fashion, very old school, primitive agriculture, whatever you call it. And we always look for a person to blame when there is a mistake or when we fail to meet an operational constraint. For example, the loss of Maroli is one of the first example. We need a person to blame. Now, who do I blame? If there is a mistake that's made by AI, is the leadership going to stand up to the job? Or do we need something more advanced in terms of AI to make this organizational excellence? Do we need something like leadership excellence? I'm not sure if I framed the question correctly, but I see a guess there. But how do we address it?
No, thanks for the question. That is a great question. I can answer that from a process perspective, but I think it probably requires a more of an AI-centric answer to that. The data process? Yeah. From a process perspective, it is quite straightforward. When you transform your processes, you do map them out, and you do have very clear guidelines of what that process is and what the variations to that process can be. And if something happens, it's quite easy to analyze that data and see where in the process, where in that process flow, the breakdown was. Who was it and where was it that a particular process wasn't followed properly? Because the process is quite well defined. As I said earlier, comprehensive training, super important. You do not leave it to the individual users to work out how they can navigate the system to get past the particular screen that they're in. So you will be able to see, going back through the data, effectively reverse engineering that process, that particular process, to find out where was the breakdown. And then it's a case of, well, not who do we blame, because ultimately it can come down to either a training problem, badly defined process, and where the data has not met the requirements. Hello. Hi, Shraddha.
Hello.
But I'll pass on to David to add your part.
Okay.
It's a good question. I'm not going to comment on the culture within defence, because I feel like, there's some other challenges there that need to be handled, right? We'll let politicians to deal with that. So you'll have seen like the emergence of autonomous driving over the last 10 years or so, and it's still not quite there, but it's getting better and better, right? So 350,000 people a year die in the US alone from road traffic accidents. Yet one Tesla crashes and the world ends. So if you're looking for a blame situation, you kind of got to look at what the alternative is. What would have happened at a macro level across defense if the technologies at which you're trying to pinpoint blame on weren't there in the first place? So I think your question is valid because there's a point in time incident where, something happened and we want to find a root cause analysis for it. But that's a systemic process issue that will have many components. Intelligence may be part of that. But I would always caution mindful pointing the finger at something, because at the end of the day, the accountability stops with the head of defense because there's a process issue across the whole piece. So I'm not really going to be able to answer your question. What I will say, though, around if AI is part of the process, is it is a tool to be used in the end-to-end process of whatever happened in that situation. There'll be people in the loop. There'll be individuals responsible for training. There'll be governance at play. There'll be controls around accuracy. And unfortunately, and this is unfortunate, AI really is, it's a mirror and a reflection of humanity. We're not perfect, so it's going to make mistakes. And the counterfactual to that is, how good are we versus the technology? To the point I made around like tax advice, right? Tax advisors are 70% accurate because there's too much information to know. We can get that to 90, 98, 99% accuracy. So I would hate the fact that if there's a genuine accident happens, that you really are looking for blame, because shit happens. And sometimes we've just got to get over it. I mean, that's probably the end of my political career, but,
I suppose
yeah.
I suppose the key is traceability as well. So through the processes and so on, as you go through the business use cases, through everything that you do, that data is still there. That information of what happened, when it happened, how it happened, all of that is still there, whether AI is used or not. And that's the key thing. So it's a mind shift in a way of efficiency by using AI, by using your workflow, your data that you have. If you really go back years ago, we've actually been using AI for many years, as I said. And we've sort of overcome some of that fear over time. And so we're now getting to that economy of scale in a way where businesses are looking at it saying, well, how can I truly take advantage of efficiencies and take control of my data, my processes, my workflows I do, and applying those business rules. And in those use cases, get that efficiency. But again, traceability is still there.
Chris, I can just end up a question for you, I think, in the first instance. What do you see as some of the obstacles to digital transformation in New Zealand, specifically like the John continents? And just how we might go about thinking about those as play one.
Yeah, thank you. Whether they're specific or not to New Zealand, I don't know, but we see similar things in the UK and in Australia as well. One of the biggest obstacles is the organisation's own clarity on its strategy and direction. And I did touch on this before, but without that clarity on strategy and direction and the ability to translate that into then what do you need to do from an operations and a technology perspective, there's going to be a gap there, and that's when it can feel like throwing pasta at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? So I think that's number one. The second is probably comes down to mindset of leadership. So we've seen over the last year businesses respond differently who are in very similar environments, and that's with the current economic conditions. So some businesses have seen current economic conditions very similar in terms of the industry they're in, the environment they're in, and responded very differently. Some are doing the mahi now to look at process improvement, adoption of technology, so that next year they're running. And others are hunkering down and waiting till the storm passes. two completely different mindsets to the same situation, and I think it's very true of digital transformation as well. A mindset that says if it's an owner mindset, I've built the business up to this, and I'm happy. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to ride this out, then I'm going to retire. Then that's one mindset. Another mindset says, what's the legacy I'm going to leave? What's the growth that we can get it to, so that when I do sell and I retire, I'm selling it for more value than I would have in the past. We used an analogy before about all of the work that you do in the 6 months that you lead up to sell your house so that somebody else can enjoy it. Do that work now. So that's really this mindset thing. And then the third thing would really be around capability and culture of the organization. So you notice none of the things I've said are about technology itself or investment in technology. It's all about how you set the organization up for clarity of direction, culture, and capability. Does anybody want to add to that? You guys probably have a few views as well.
Yes, nailed it. I think I literally. So I have a from this question, but lastly, I want to do a presentation around the actually part for setting data. It's very quite fresh.
Would be if you're going to a customer, and how do you deal with the organisation balance between unlocking the data and creating value versus the security and that becoming a roadblock? How do you navigate around that, and is it a case by case, or what do you have to say on that?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting question, and it's actually something that is becoming. Cybersecurity has always been a priority, but it's becoming much more of a priority as we start to build in more connectivity to the organization. So by putting machines online, you're essentially introducing frailty points to a cybersecurity network. So a really robust cybersecurity policy and infrastructure is absolutely crucial. In terms of sharing data with customers, that's going to be dependent on the business itself. But one of the things that we look at is horizontal integration. So how integrated are your systems to your suppliers and to your customers? And that could be very simple in terms of EDI or APIs into customer system. But you're absolutely right to call out the cybersecurity risk of that. So things like encryption, two-factor authentication, the ability to segregate networks. So having a really robust cutoff between your OT network and your IT network is absolutely crucial. So that if there's a risk in the shop floor, then you're able to close down the IT function of the business very quickly. So absolutely, it needs to be one of those things that we consider right up front. What's your data governance strategy and the architecture that's sitting underneath it, and how does cybersecurity play a role in there to protect it?
From an Epicor perspective, we use GenAI as part of our solution and OWAP standards, large language models and so on, and giving agents and tools that allow you to actually configure within what your business needs are within ERP. We do work, obviously, allowing that configurability, but the security is like someone logging on themselves with their credentials as well. So there's a very use case, very managed part from a perspective of your own data and information. It doesn't actually get shared anywhere. It gets pulled and used as you need from a business perspective within your organization. So we don't push data out from a security perspective. We obviously in the cloud also work with regards to, Azure, for example, all the standard security that goes with that as well. But yeah, that's pretty much from a perspective of use cases. That's where we're coming from it, but using Gen AI as well.
Can I speak from our perspective? So we've gone through quite a large digital transformation. We have a lot of data from hundreds of thousands of suppliers in our system. So security is a big factor for us. We've undertaken a lot of the types of controls that have been spoken about. I think data segregation is one of the biggest issues. So if you can segment your data There's a lot of controls through APIs. Segmentation of your networks is critical, and having that underlying policies and procedures is critical in the security realm. A lot of people believe that if I go into AWS, for example, it's a protected network, therefore I'm protected. That is not the case. You must implement security at your own level, and you must implement the appropriate controls to get that security level that a lot of these environments portray. So it's not just a simple case of saying, I'm in that environment, therefore I'm secure. You still must have that underlying profile yourself.
Good, thanks. We have an online question regarding the trailed AP automation software. The question is, how does trailed AP automation differ from all the other AP automation AP solutions out there? And over to Shraddha.
I'll jump in with that one, just double checking you can hear me okay. Awesome. So there's a lot of AP automation solutions in market. And I think with this talk about security and the focus on security, I think it's important to remember how Trailed came to be. And it's because of a real life incident that where our founder's company that he was working at the time paid a fraudulent invoice. And when he went back to see that, and hopefully that came through in the presentation, but when he went back to have a look at a review as to how that came to be, the actual invoice looked identical. The supplier was being impersonated, the business email was compromised, a whole combination and series of events, quite crafted in nature, that allowed this fraudulent invoice to be paid. And so actually Trailed wasn't born for AP automation, it was born from payment security off the back of those invoices. And so I think in terms of differentiator, it's actually bringing those two things together. So automating your workflows to make things faster, of course, but actually slowing you down when you're about to have something that's high risk for your organisation take place. And so intercepting that payment is where we bring that level of security to validate every supplier throughout the economy and just make sure that the business is not exposed to risk in terms of payment fraud. So it's a great question because the market is saturated with solutions for AP. And I guess it's more around, combining the protection piece as well as then allowing for operational efficiency with the automation as well.
Here we go. Okay, thanks, Shraddha. That's great. We'll be talking to you soon. We've got a couple more minutes before we need to go to our closing statement and be done by 12:30. So any more questions?
So go up to 30,000 feet and think about the big picture. Efficiency gains great wealth for our country. What's the panel's view of the impact of these things for New Zealand, and not just domestically, but how can we leverage this and our time advantage? We wake up first in the world, and many of the world's largest economies are asleep when we're awake. How can we take these ideas? I almost see bankers in great. Sorry about that. I'm thinking about this. I lived in Hong Kong for a decade, and we're thinking about how to leverage New Zealand's time zone and technology for 20, 30 years. And it just feels like we still aren't really taking advantage of it. What's your view?
I believe Adam and David both spoke to this earlier on.
Yeah.
Do you want to repeat a few things on those?
Yeah, look, I think it is something that we haven't exploited enough as a nation. And we often see, and even I sort of mentioned it a couple of times, we often see our location as being a disadvantage, and it absolutely is in terms of getting product into market and getting materials in. But our isolation is also, comes with some degree of security. And New Zealand has a very strong reputation in the world for being a secure secure country to do business with. I think we need to double down on that and look to some of those industries like defence, like automotive, others that really require that degree of security and really play to that. There's some really interesting examples coming out of Europe now where countries like Slovenia are actually doing amazing things in terms of accelerating their economies very, very quickly by investing in the right skills and the right technologies and making it, putting incentives in for organizations to come to their countries. Slovenia is a country about the same population as New Zealand, and yes, it's closer to the market in terms of being in Europe, but same population size, very similar in terms of geography, and there's no reason that we can't replicate that kind of thing here. But absolutely, it's an undervalued resource, I think. We're starting to see that a little bit with some of the data center investment. I think we're seeing some of the sort of geopolitical security concerns start to play to our favor by having people invest in data centers that are going to be secure. Now, obviously, there's other geographical and geological considerations there as well, but certainly from a geopolitical perspective, we're seen as very safe and secure.
Thanks, Adam. So there's two things I think around wealth creation that are really interesting right now. There's productivity, which is doing stuff faster in a way. There's obviously more around that. And then there's building assets that hold more value when you create them first. And Australia and New Zealand are a really unique position because, and I say this with the greatest respect to the part of the world which we live in. I'm not from New Zealand natively. I'm from the UK. I chose to make my life here because it's a great place to live. But on a global scale, we really don't get cared about that much, right? Which is awesome, because if you look at productivity, yes, everyone needs to be more productive. I get that piece. But from an asset creation perspective, there's so much intellectual property that you need to run a business effectively here that no one else cares about. So, for example, to build a Australian, New Zealand ESG AI service, right? The Americans aren't going to build it because we're too small. The Europeans aren't going to build it because they don't care about us. So if you're owning intellectual property in a domain, you want to go really quickly because at some point the Americans will care about it because they'll have dominated the rest of the world and they'll look at the rounding error of New Zealand and go, cool, I can get an extra few bucks down there. But that's the wealth creation opportunity that we've all got right now of going, how do we follow what's happening internationally, but do it on a domestically region level to create productivity for ourselves, but also create an asset that someone else is going to come require in the future, which means big bucks into the economy, personal wealth for shareholders, jobs in country, as opposed to doing what sometimes can happen where we just sit on the fence, wait for it to get splinters in our ass, and then all of a sudden the Americans come and build the software anyway. So I wanted to kind of break that statement down because I think there's two sides to it. Yeah, you have to be keeping up times with technology to do the same better. But never have we been in a position where you can take your intellectual property, digitize it, create an asset, use it domestically, and then have that as a wealth creation tool for international money coming in down the line. Half of our customers are in that mode. They're like, we've been working in this space where we are people driven. We can't be that anymore. We're moving digitally driven. Consulting firms mainly, right? We're just a better way to do it. We want to do that first, so our competitors use our software, we create wealth, and then at some point we get acquired. So that's the different side of it's not a digital transformation conversation. That's a case of how do you leverage what you've got in your back pocket? There's one example of this, which I won't name the company because I can't, but they're a traditional engineering organization doing geotechnical engineering, drilling holes in the ground, pulling them out of the ground, doing analysis on them, and then spending literally days, 20 hours per report of keyboard bashing to turn that into a document ready for Auckland Council. We've taken that 20-hour process down to sub an hour. Now that sub hour is with human in the loop for approvals. So that's 19 hours back on 2,000 projects a year. So that's a lot of money, right? Millions and millions of dollars back into that. They've done it for themselves. They're now going out to every other engineering company going, we've built this for ourselves, subscribe to it. That business was worth about $30 million as a consulting company. In under 6 months, they'll create more value, enterprise value, by selling that software to their competitors that it's taken them over the last 40 years to create in just doing services. That's wealth creation. They're leveraging their legacy for future use. Now, the flip side to that is they do nothing. They don't embrace technology. They're not productive. Someone else builds the software. They're out of business. Their EV goes to zero. So that's wealth decline. Yeah. It's cool though, isn't it? Eh? Yep.
I was actually going to say, working for an American company, I see a lot of innovative things happening in New Zealand. And actually, we have a lot of customers that actually use IoT when it came out. We started doing a lot around that, and a lot of them have digital transformation projects happening to start taking advantage and taking intellectual property they have in certain processes, and they're turning it into things that actually are becoming a revenue stream for them and so on as well. So we see a lot of that. And I'll be honest with you, I get pretty excited when I sit in meetings and they bring New Zealand's name up every now and then, because there are a lot of people in New Zealand that are quite innovative. And I think we're also a good test bed for a lot of things as well, as we've figured out. And we take advantage of things very quickly as well. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about where New Zealand's going.
Yeah, can I just add to that? So the last time I was in New Zealand was in 1999. And it's been a while. But one of the things that really impressed me is we have been introduced to an incubator, local incubator, that the innovation that we've seen is just next level. The problem is that it's just not being spoken about loud enough. That's where we get excited, right? Is to share that innovation to the world. And I'll use an analogy. We had a project where Boeing Defence Australia came to us and said, we're struggling. We've got an autonomous vehicles project that we just can't find the capability, or we don't know how to get traction in this project. And so I said to them, fine, we'll help you on one condition. And they said, what is that? And I said that you invest your entire project team for the day, and we will drive results for you. And he was like, okay, no problem. And I said, and just one more thing, you need to bring your head of procurement into the room as well. Needless to say, we put the opportunity out to the market. We actually had to extend it by an additional 2 days because of the overwhelming response. These weren't big end of town companies. These were 1- and 2-man companies that were registering to have a meet the bidder buyer session with a one-on-one with the engineering and project team. The outcome of that was phenomenal. These were people that were former Lockheed Martins and various other entities that had gone off on their own because they had a passion to innovate, but they just couldn't break the barrier of procurement. Why? Because there's such stringent protocols to ensure that the procurement teams are held accountable for the way that they actually engage with suppliers. That is a problem in itself. And what it highlighted to Boeing Defence Australia was that there was actually incredible innovation that they identified as a process of that. Now they had a problem because they've still got the procurement protocols. So they said, now what? We've got all these great innovative ideas. How do we engage? Again, this was a bit of a think tank with them, and it ended up that what they were doing was that they were actually joining those suppliers with the primes under those primes to be able to circumvent the barrier to entry through the procurement protocols. Where I'm going with this is that I've been overly impressed, and I know Phil has as well. We were given some alcohol that we're taking back with us. That makes us very happy. But the long and the short of it is, typically that process would have taken months to create that bottle. They're doing it in 72 hours. This is groundbreaking innovation that is right here on this doorstep. And we were walking through town the other day, and we were being shown, oh, that company does that. That's a New Zealand company. That company does that. That's a New Zealand company. And I hear, there are clothing companies that are white labeling, and Prada are using their products and putting their brand on it. That's all being done here. So I just don't think that it's being crowed enough about.
New Zealand's the silent achiever.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thanks for your questions. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. If you do have any more questions, please click on the QR code and post them on the panel. We will get back to you. There are more questions, we just run out of time. So thank you very much again. At this point, I'd like to bring Lakshmi up for the closing statements. Thank you all.